In 1994, a family found a box of letters hidden in their grandfather's attic. Within weeks of reading them, sickness, violence, and sudden death began tearing through their bloodline. This isn't folklore. This really happened, and no one who touched those letters escaped. October 12, 1994. The house looked like any other quiet suburban home on that October evening. A two-story beige-painted house with a red brick chimney and a backyard that backed onto a row of tall maple trees. The neighborhood was still. The kind of street where you'd expect kids riding bikes, a barking dog or two, and porch lights flickering on as dinner time approached. But that night, inside the upstairs hallway, a family was pulling down the old folding ladder to the attic. After their grandfather's passing, the Harper family began clearing out his home. It was a task most families know too well, sorting through old furniture, yellowed photographs, and keepsakes that once belonged to a man who had lived to 82. But what they found in the attic was something no one could prepare for. Thomas Harper, 45, eldest son, practical, an accountant. He was the one pushing to clear out the house. Elaine Harper, 42, his wife, quiet and skeptical, but deeply protective of her children. Rebecca Harper, 17, teenager, curious, artistic. The first to climb into the attic. Michael Harper, 12, younger brother, mischievous, easily frightened but always tagging along. Extended relatives, uncles, aunts were involved in the estate paperwork, but it was Thomas's family who took on the bulk of sorting through the house. The attic was the kind of place most houses had, dark, low-ceilinged, with insulation spilling out from the corners and dust thick enough to taste. Rebecca was the first to crawl in with a flashlight. "It smells like old books up here," she called down. Her voice was muffled, the beam of her flashlight cutting across cardboard boxes and suitcases. Michael followed halfway up the ladder. "Don't touch the spiders," he said, laughing nervously. Their father, Thomas, stayed at the bottom. "Just bring down anything important. We'll sort through it." Rebecca's light caught something unusual, an old wooden box pushed into the farthest corner, behind a broken lamp and stacks of yellowed newspapers from the 1960s. Unlike the other dusty boxes, this one was heavy, carved with a metal clasp that was half rusted shut. She tugged at it. "Dad, there's something back here." "It looks old, really old." When they pulled it down, all four of them gathered around it in the upstairs hallway. The box wasn't locked. With a little force, the clasp gave way. Inside, neatly bundled with twine, were dozens of letters. Each envelope was marked with unfamiliar handwriting, bold, slanted script, black ink that hadn't faded despite the decades. Elaine frowned. "Who keeps letters tied up like this?" Rebecca picked one up and squinted at the date. October 13th, 1928. The envelope wasn't addressed to anyone in the family they knew. The name on the front read simply, "For blood, not strangers." Michael asked the obvious, "What does that even mean?" They laughed nervously at the strange wording, chalking it up to some eccentric relative. But later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Elaine heard something unusual. It was a faint rustling sound coming from upstairs. She assumed Rebecca was still awake, maybe moving around her room. But when she checked, Rebecca was fast asleep, her art supplies scattered across the desk. The noise came again, soft, like paper sliding across the floor. Elaine followed it to the upstairs hallway. The wooden box of letters, which they had left at the bottom of the attic ladder, was sitting a foot closer to the bathroom door. She froze, staring at it. For a moment she thought she was imagining things. She nudged it back into place with her foot and went to bed. The next morning, when Thomas came down for coffee, he frowned. "Did you move this?" The box was now sitting on the kitchen table. "No," Elaine whispered. October 15th, 1994. 2 days later, relatives arrived to help with the estate. Among them was Thomas's younger brother, Daniel, 38, a school teacher. Over dinner, the conversation turned to strange letters. Elaine mentioned what had happened with the box moving on its own, though she tried to downplay it. Daniel laughed. "You've been watching too many late-night horror flicks. Boxes don't walk around on their own." Still, curiosity got the better of them. After dinner, they opened a few of the letters. Inside, the handwriting was jagged, feverish, as though written in a rush. The words weren't like any normal letter. They were curses. "To the blood that betrays, sickness will take root. To the seed that forgets, fire will cleanse the name. To the child that laughs, silence will follow. Everyone in the room went quiet. Rebecca whispered, "These are like death threats." Michael frowned. "But they're so old. Who would they even be for?" Daniel shoved the letters back into the box. "They're just some crazy ramblings. Probably some ancestor who lost his mind." But Elaine couldn't shake the feeling. Why would he keep them? Why lock them away in the attic, hidden? That same night, as the family began preparing to leave, a scream came from upstairs. Rebecca came running down, pale, clutching her hand. Her palm had a fresh cut across it, long and shallow, as if she had run it across a blade. "I didn't touch anything," she insisted. "I was just brushing my hair and it just happened." The adults assumed she must have caught it on a mirror shard or something sharp. But later, when Elaine went up to check, she saw it. On Rebecca's desk, one of the envelopes was lying open. The flap was edged with fresh blood. The following week, the Harpers tried to move on. They stored the box in the garage, planning to hand it over to an archivist or historian. But strange things began happening. Michael complained of hearing whispering voices when he tried to sleep. The family dog, Max, refused to go near the garage, growling at the door. Light bulbs in the upstairs hallway flickered constantly. Even after being replaced, Thomas tried to explain it all away. Old wiring, kids' imaginations. Stress from the move. But Elaine wrote in her private journal on October 21st, 1994, "I don't feel safe in this house anymore. The box, it's not normal. Why would anyone invent something like this? And why do I feel like it's watching us?" On October 23rd, 1994, just after midnight, Thomas awoke to the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, pacing the hallway outside their bedroom. He sat up, listening. Elaine stirred. "Do you hear that?" Thomas grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the attic ladder was pulled down, the hatch wide open. Slowly, Thomas climbed the creaking steps. His flashlight cut through the darkness. The attic was empty, except for the wooden box of letters, sitting exactly where Rebecca had first found it. When he reached down to pick it up, every letter inside spilled open at once, fanning out across the attic floor, and on each envelope, the inked words had changed. Every one of them now bore the names of his family: Elaine, Thomas, Rebecca, Michael. Thomas stood frozen, staring at the letters that should have been untouched for decades. His flashlight shook in his hand. Behind him, in the shadows of the attic, came a whisper. Low, guttural, unmistakable. The bloodline begins to pay, and then the attic hatch slammed shut. By late October 1994, the Harpers could no longer dismiss what was happening inside their grandfather's home. What began as strange noises and unexplained cuts had escalated into something that seemed to target each member of the family directly. They had tried to contain the letters, to treat them as old paper and ink. But by now, the curse had already begun to feed. October 25th, 1994. The Harper kitchen was always busiest in the mornings. Toast popping, cereal bowls clattering, Michael arguing about cartoons playing on the small countertop TV. But on October 25th, the energy was different. Elaine sat silently at the table, staring at her coffee as if it held some secret. Rebecca was pale, barely touching her food. Thomas kept checking the garage door, making sure it was locked. "Why do we even keep that thing here?" Rebecca asked suddenly. Thomas looked up. "Because it's evidence. If we just throw it away, then what? Someone else finds it, someone else gets hurt?" Elaine shook her head. "Tom, listen to yourself. We're not archivists. This isn't our burden. We should burn it." Michael perked up at the word. "Burn it? Like a horror movie?" Rebecca snapped. "Shut up, Michael, it's not funny." The tension in the room snapped when the toaster suddenly sparked, smoke filling the air. Thomas yanked the cord from the outlet. Coughing, Rebecca muttered, almost under her breath. "It doesn't want to be destroyed." October 26, 1994. By this point, even outsiders began to notice the strange atmosphere in the Harper home. Family friend Janet Myers, who stopped by on October 26th, gave an unsettling statement years later. Janet, recorded interview 2008. "I only went to drop off some casseroles for Elaine, but the moment I walked in, I felt it. The air, it was heavy, like static before a storm. I saw Rebecca in the living room. She was just staring at the garage door, not blinking. I asked if she was okay, but she didn't even seem to hear me. Then Thomas came rushing in, slammed the garage door shut, and locked it right in front of me. He looked white as a sheet. I'll never forget it. He said, "Don't go in there. Please, don't ever go in there. Why would anyone invent something like that?" October 28, 1994. By late October, the disturbances became harder to dismiss. That evening, Thomas's brother Daniel visited again, this time bringing his camcorder. He wanted to prove to Elaine that all of this was just paranoia. He set the camcorder on the hallway table, lens pointed toward the garage. "See," he said. "Nothing's happening," but within minutes, the bulb above them began to flicker violently. The camcorder caught it clearly, the shadows in the hallway lengthening. "Distorting," Elaine whispered. "Daniel, turn it off." He didn't. He leaned closer to the garage door, listening. From inside, the faint sound of scratching began. Slow at first, then faster, as though claws were raking across the wood. Michael covered his ears. "Make it stop!" Suddenly the bulb burst, showering the hallway and glass. In the darkness, the garage door rattled as if something inside was trying to break out. Daniel fumbled with the camcorder, finally shutting it off. He never showed the footage to anyone. October 30th, 1994, 2 nights later. Rebecca disappeared for 2 hours. Elaine found her in the attic, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the scattered letters. Her eyes were vacant, and her lips moved silently as if she were reciting something. "Rebecca," Elaine shouted, rushing forward. Her daughter blinked, dazed. "I don't remember coming up here." On the floor in front of her lay one open letter. Its message was new, the ink impossibly fresh. The first daughter must speak the words. "The first son must bleed." Elaine grabbed Rebecca and dragged her out of the attic, tears streaming down her face. "We're leaving this house tonight." But when she tried to start the car in the driveway, the engine refused to turn over. The headlights flickered once, then died completely. October 31st, 1994. It was Halloween night when the Harper family finally realized this was no coincidence. Neighbors remembered the house being dark, uninviting, while children trick-or-treated all around it. Inside, the family was trapped. Michael later told investigators he woke to the sound of whispering, not faint this time, loud, urgent, all around him. He said it sounded like dozens of voices speaking at once, calling his name. When Thomas rushed to his son's room, he found the window wide open despite the locked latch. And on Michael's bed, scattered like fallen leaves, were 3 envelopes. Each bore his name. One was already torn open. Inside, "Silence the boy." November 1st, 1994. The following night, Elaine was in the kitchen when she felt it, something cold brushing against the back of her neck. She spun around. No one was there. Then a knife clattered to the floor from the counter. Thomas came running in at her scream. The knife lay inches from Elaine's feet. She swore she hadn't touched it. Thomas picked it up, shaking. "We're getting rid of the box. Tomorrow. No matter what." November 2nd, 1994, at 6:15 p.m., Thomas carried the wooden box into the backyard. Elaine, Rebecca, and Michael followed, shivering despite the mild weather. He set the box on top of a pile of dry logs, doused it with lighter fluid, and struck a match. The fire roared to life. Flames licked the wood, crackling as the box caught. The family stood in silence, watching as smoke curled into the night. For a moment, it seemed to work. The box blackened, the letters inside curling into ash. Relief washed over them, but then the fire died suddenly, not burned out, extinguished, as though smothered by unseen hands. The logs lay blackened, cold, and in the center sat the box, completely intact. Rebecca screamed. Elaine grabbed Thomas's arm. "It doesn't want to die. Don't you see? It can't die." November 3rd, 1994. Even neighbors began noticing disturbing events. In a statement from 1995, neighbor Paul Gallagher described what he saw. "I looked out my window around midnight. The Harper place. Their garage light was flashing on and off, on and off. I thought maybe they were having an electrical problem. But then I saw Thomas out there. He was standing in the driveway, staring up at the attic window. What chilled me was that he wasn't moving. Just frozen there. And in the attic window, I swear to God, I saw someone else standing behind the glass. Not his wife, not his kids. Someone taller. Someone I didn't recognize. I closed my blinds. I didn't want to see any more." November 4th, 1994. The breaking point. The next evening, the Harpers gathered in the living room. The letters were spread out on the coffee table as if mocking them. Elaine whispered, "We need help." A priest, a historian, someone. "We can't do this alone." Rebecca sat with her knees drawn to her chest. "It won't matter. It already knows our names." Suddenly the house phone rang. Thomas grabbed it. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, low and gravelly, rasped, "The bloodline begins to pay." The line went dead. Thomas stared at the receiver, trembling. It knew this number. How could it know this number? Before anyone could answer, a loud crash came from the garage. They rushed to the door. The wooden box had moved again. This time it sat upright in the center of the garage floor, lid wide open. The letters floated above it, suspended in the air, rustling as though caught in a wind that no one else could feel. One by one they fell to the ground, spelling out names: Elaine, Rebecca, Michael, Thomas, Daniel. And then a final envelope drifted down, blank, except for one chilling word scrawled in fresh ink: "Next." The garage light flickered, humming loudly. Suddenly, every envelope burst open at once. The sound like dozens of throats gasping for air. The family screamed as shadows erupted from the letters, twisting up the walls, stretching across the ceiling, and then darkness. By early November 1994, the Harper family could no longer deny the reality of what was happening. The letters were no longer simply moving on their own or whispering in the dark. They had begun to act with intent. Each day brought new signs, new threats, and the undeniable sense that their family had been chosen for destruction. November 5th, 1994, the Harpers hadn't slept. The night after the envelopes burst open, every lamp in the house shorted out. The phones rang repeatedly with no one on the line. Shadows crawled along the walls even when no one moved. Thomas tried to take control. At breakfast, he spread out a legal pad, writing names and possible explanations. Electrical issues. "Gas leaks. Maybe a prank caller," Elaine snapped. "Are you listening to yourself? Gas leaks don't write our names on envelopes." Rebecca sat silent, still pale. Michael clutched her arm, afraid to even eat. Finally, Thomas sighed. "Then we need to understand it. We need to know who wrote these letters." November 6, 1994. That afternoon, Thomas and Daniel drove into town. The local library wasn't large, but its archives went back almost a century. They searched for the name of their grandfather, Arthur Harper, and cross-referenced old newspapers. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Marriage announcements, a farm sale, a few civic contributions. But in the October 1928 editions, something caught Daniel's eye. A short column read, "Local man Arthur Harper is involved in a property dispute with neighbor Elijah Wren. Wren accused Harper of breaking boundary lines and desecrating private land believed to be consecrated ground. Witnesses claim heated arguments continued for weeks." Thomas rubbed his temple. "Elijah Wren, do you think—" Daniel nodded grimly. "If these letters are from him, it wasn't just a feud. He believed he was cursing us." November 7, 1994, that night, Elaine wrote in her journal, "The house feels sick. Even when I open the windows, the air is heavy, like breathing through damp cloth." I found Michael sleepwalking again, standing in front of the garage door, whispering words I didn't recognize. Why would anyone invent something like this, unless it was meant to last forever? November 8, 1994, Rebecca wandered into the attic during daylight, compelled by something she couldn't explain. She carried a camcorder Daniel had left behind, recording everything. As she scanned the walls, she noticed a loose panel near the beams. Behind it, she found a narrow compartment. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, brittle with age. On the front was a name written in black ink, Elijah Wren. When Rebecca opened it, her breath caught. Every page was filled with curses, symbols, and repeated names, including Harper. One passage stood out, scrawled across 2 pages. "Blood betrays blood. The sins of the father stain the children. May the line rot until it ends. Let no name escape the debt." Rebecca showed the journal to her parents. Elaine nearly dropped it. Thomas whispered, This is proof." He wasn't just angry. He bound this curse to the family itself. November 9th, 1994 narrator. Later interviews revealed that even people outside the family felt the effects. One neighbor, Sarah Linton, described an encounter on November 9th. Sarah, 1997 interview. I was walking past the Harper house with my dog. It was getting dark, maybe around 6 p.m. I looked up and saw someone in the attic window. But it wasn't Thomas or Elaine. I knew their faces. This was different. The figure was tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes that almost glowed. The dog refused to walk any closer. It just barked and barked until I dragged it away. And the whole time I swore I heard whispers behind me, like the voices were following. November 10th, 1994, that night, Thomas confronted the attic itself. He set up a folding chair, sat with the box of letters, and demanded answers. "If you want me, take me." "Leave my family alone," he shouted. The attic air turned icy. The letters lifted slowly from the box, circling his head. From the darkness came a voice, not Elijah's, but something deeper, older. "The debt is not yours alone. The bloodline must be paid." Thomas fell to his knees, sobbing. He realized then that the curse wasn't just words on paper. It was alive. November 11th, 1994, Elaine begged Thomas to take the children and leave. "We'll go to a hotel anywhere. Just get them out of here." But Thomas shook his head. "You can't run from blood. It will follow us," Rebecca muttered from the couch. "It already has." Michael asked, "Are we going to die?" No one answered. November 12th, 1994, Daniel returned with more research. Elijah Wren wasn't just a farmer, he explained. He was part of a cult. Local papers called them the Hollow Faith. They believed in curses passed through generations. Rituals involving blood, fire, and silence. It says here that in 1928, Wren's daughter died suddenly. Sickness no doctor could explain. He blamed Arthur Harper, said our grandfather poisoned her. Whether it was true or not, he swore vengeance. And he wrote it into these letters. Elaine whispered, "So every word in those envelopes is a spell?" Daniel nodded. "And every generation is a target." November 13th, 1994. The activity in the house worsened. Doors slammed violently, even when locked. Family photographs warped. Faces blurred or scratched out. The television turned on by itself, playing only static. Michael was found sleepwalking again, this time clutching an unopened envelope in his hand. When Thomas tried to take it, Michael resisted with unnatural strength, screaming, "It's mine! He said it's mine!" The boy collapsed moments later, sobbing, with no memory of what had happened. November 14th, 1994, that night. Rebecca was drawing at her desk when she noticed something new on one of the letters. It wasn't her name this time. It was a date. November 17th, 1994. She brought it to her parents, trembling. "What does this mean?" "Something's going to happen that day." Elaine clutched the letter. "It's a countdown," Thomas whispered. 3 days. The night grew silent after midnight. Too silent. Then, without warning, every phone in the house rang at once. When Thomas picked up, the voice spoke again, calm, deliberate. 3 days. The bloodline ends. The line went dead. The family stared at each other in horror. For the first time, they realized the curse wasn't random. It was scheduled, and the deadline was approaching fast. By mid-November 1994, the Harper family lived in constant fear. The strange letters no longer lay dormant. They dictated events, named dates, and made promises of death. With November 17th approaching, the family prepared as best they could, but nothing could prepare them for what that night would bring. November 15th, 1994, the Harpers were exhausted. Every night brought whispers, scratching, and shadow figures at the edges of their vision. Thomas taped crosses to the walls, though he hadn't been to church in years. Elaine scattered salt at the doors and windows. Daniel insisted on keeping a baseball bat within reach. Michael asked, "Will that stop it?" No one answered. Rebecca muttered, "It's not a person." "You can't hit it with a bat," Elaine snapped. "Don't talk like that." But her hands trembled. November 16th, 1994. Elaine called a local priest, Father Matthews, explaining what they had found. "I don't usually handle curses," he admitted carefully. "But if these writings are rooted in genuine ritual, destruction may not be possible. Sometimes the only solution is endurance." "What does that mean?" Elaine demanded. "Survive the night, pray, and do not give in to the voices." She hung up, horrified. Endurance against something that already knew their names? That evening, Thomas found Michael staring at a blank wall in the living room, whispering, "What are you saying, son?" Michael turned, eyes wide, and said in a voice that wasn't his own, "Blood betrays blood. November 17th, 1994. The day of the deadline dawned gray, overcast. The family barely spoke, moving through the house like ghosts. At 4 p.m., Daniel brought food from town. No one ate. At 6:15 p.m., every clock in the house stopped ticking. At 7 p.m., the power went out. The family gathered in the living room with candles. Their shadows danced along the walls, elongated, unnatural. Elaine whispered, "It's starting." 30 p.m. The first bang came from the garage. The sound of fists pounding against the door, rattling the frame. Thomas gripped the baseball bat. "Stay here." "No." Elaine grabbed his arm. "Don't go out there." But the pounding grew louder, shaking the walls. Then the door handle began to twist on its own. Rebecca screamed. "It's coming in." Thomas raised the bat, but the door didn't open. Instead, the sound stopped, only to reappear upstairs in the attic. This time it was footsteps. Slow, heavy, crossing from one side to the other. p.m. Elaine gathered the children close. "Ignore it. Don't listen." But then the box in the living room rattled violently. The lid burst open, letters flying like birds around the room. The family ducked as the envelopes slapped against the walls, sealing even their faces. Each letter now bore not just their names, but their fates. Thomas, Fire Elaine, Silence, Rebecca, Blood Michael, Shadow Daniel. Death Michael screamed, covering his ears. "Make it stop!" Suddenly all the letters dropped, covering the floor. Silence followed, thick, suffocating. 15 p.m. The phone rang. Against his better judgment, Daniel answered. A whisper. "Your name was last." Then a scream pierced the line, his own voice, echoing back at him. The receiver exploded in his hand, shards cutting deep into his palm. Blood dripped onto the letters at his feet. The moment his blood touched the paper, the garage door blew open. A blast of freezing air swept into the house, and with it came a shadow figure, tall, featureless, its presence bending the air around it. Rebecca collapsed, sobbing. Elaine clutched Michael to her chest. Thomas swung the bat, striking nothing but air. The figure didn't flinch. It reached for Daniel. He screamed as the shadow engulfed him, dragging him toward the garage. His body convulsed once, and then he was gone. Only the baseball bat lay where he had stood. p.m. For a long moment, the house was silent again. Elaine whispered, "Maybe it's over. Maybe it just wanted Daniel." But Thomas shook his head. "It said the bloodline. Not just him. All of us." Rebecca stood, trembling. "We can run. We don't have to stay." She ran to the front door, yanking it open, only to scream. Outside, the street was gone. No houses, no cars, no streetlights. Just endless darkness stretching in every direction. When she slammed the door shut, her skin was icy cold. There's nowhere to go. p.m. At exactly 11 SAR, the candles flickered violently. Then the drapes in the living room caught fire. Flames racing up the fabric. Thomas grabbed a jug of water, dousing them, but the fire spread across the wall. Spelling words in black smoke. The bloodline ends at midnight. The family huddled together. The fire burned, yet the smoke never choked them. It was as if the flames were a message, not an accident. 30 p.m. The house groaned as though alive. Walls shook, ceiling cracked, dishes shattered. Michael fainted in Elaine's arms. Rebecca clutched her mother, sobbing, "I don't want to die." Thomas stood, trembling, staring at the attic hatch. "It started up there. It has to end up there." He grabbed the bat again and climbed the ladder. Elaine cried after him, but he didn't stop. 45 p.m. The attic was pitch black except for the faint glow of the letters scattered across the floor. They pulsed with light, like embers. Thomas stepped forward, shouting, "You want me? Take me! Leave them alone!" The letters rose again, circling him. A voice filled the attic, deafening. "The debt is not yours alone." The bloodline ends together, and then the letters burst into flames. Downstairs, Elaine screamed as fire poured through the ceiling. 59 p.m. The family huddled together in the living room. The house around them engulfed in fire that didn't burn like normal flame. It twisted, black, swallowing light. The grandfather clock, frozen all day, suddenly ticked once. 59:30. Rebecca whispered, "It's coming." 59:50. Michael stirred. whispering words in the same guttural tone. Blood betrays blood. Elaine held him tighter, sobbing. 59. Every letter in the house ignited at once. Screams erupting from the paper. Dozens of voices crying out. Midnight struck. The fire vanished. The house fell silent, and when the smoke cleared, only one envelope remained on the floor, unburned. It bore a new name, written in fresh black ink. Survivor. But no one dared to touch it. By the morning of November 18, 1994, the Harper house was no longer the same. The fire, the voices, the shadow figure, none of it had destroyed the family entirely. But something had shifted. The curse was no longer hidden in letters. It had chosen them openly. What the Harpers didn't know was that the worst was still to come. November 18, 1994. The family gathered in the living room at sunrise. The house was untouched by fire, walls unburned, drapes intact, furniture in place. Yet they all remembered the flames. On the floor lay the single envelope. Survivor. Thomas refused to touch it. "We leave it. We don't open it," Rebecca whispered. "But what if it tells us who lives?" Elaine snapped. "No, no more. We don't play its game." But the envelope followed them. Wherever they went, it appeared. On the kitchen counter, on the bathroom sink, even inside Elaine's purse, always sealed, always waiting. November 19th, 1994. That night, Thomas woke to find the envelope on his chest. He threw it into the fireplace and struck a match. The flames swallowed it, then sputtered out. When the smoke cleared, the envelope sat pristine in the ashes. This time, it was open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with one name written, Rebecca. November 20th, 1994. Rebecca began to change. She grew pale, withdrawn, speaking less each day. Sometimes her lips moved silently, as if repeating words no one else could hear. Michael asked, "Is she going to die?" Elaine hugged him tightly. "No, we won't let it," but Thomas knew better. The curse had been chosen. November 21st, 1994, Daniel's absence haunted them. His disappearance was reported to police, but no evidence was found. Meanwhile, Thomas dug deeper into Elijah Wren. In Old Town records, he found a chilling account. Elijah Wren, following the death of his daughter in 1928, was accused of occult practices. He claimed to have written letters of blood, binding them to the family he held responsible. Witnesses described rituals involving ink mixed with human remains. Wren was found dead in his home in November 1929, his body surrounded by unopened letters. No one claimed them. They vanished from evidence shortly after. Thomas realized the truth. The letters in his attic were the very same. November 22nd, 1994, that night, Rebecca screamed in her sleep. Elaine and Thomas rushed in to find her thrashing, eyes wide but unseeing. She shouted, "He's here! He says the debt ends with me." Thomas grabbed her shoulders. "Who, Rebecca? Who?" Her voice dropped, guttural, not her own. The first daughter must bleed. And then she collapsed, unconscious. November 23rd, 1994. Thomas packed the car. "We're leaving." "I don't care if it follows. We can't stay here." They piled into the station wagon at dawn. Elaine in the passenger seat, Rebecca and Michael in the back. The engine roared to life. Relief washed over them until they pulled out of the driveway. The road ahead was gone. Instead of suburban streets, there was only a long dirt path winding through endless trees. Elaine gasped. "This isn't real. This isn't real." They drove for hours, yet the road never changed. The trees grew denser, shadows lengthening. Finally, the car sputtered and died. Out of gas. When Thomas stepped out, the wooden box was sitting on the hood. Lid open, inside a fresh envelope, Rebecca's name again. November 24th, 1994, back in the house, Elaine confronted Thomas. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You knew something about this all along." Thomas looked broken. "My father warned me. Years ago. He said there were things in the attic we should never touch. He told me Elijah Wren cursed us. I thought it was just an old man's paranoia. I never believed it was real." Elaine slapped the table. "And now our daughter is paying for your disbelief." Rebecca, pale and shaking, whispered, "It doesn't matter. It was always going to be me." November 25th, 1994, Rebecca vanished. Elaine found her in the attic, kneeling before the box, blood dripping from her palm onto the letters. Her voice was calm, detached. "It says if I give myself, it ends." "No one else has to die," Elaine screamed, dragging her back. But the letters stuck to Rebecca's skin. Clinging like leeches, Thomas tore them off, burning his hands in the process. The attic filled with whispers. Blood for blood. "The debt ends here, November 26, 1994. Thomas realized what Elijah Wren had written. A ritual that demanded sacrifice. The curse wouldn't stop until a daughter of the Harper line gave her life. Rebecca begged them to let her. "I can feel it. It won't leave me. If I go, you all live." Elaine refused. "No, we fight this!" But the letters grew more violent. They slashed across walls, cutting deep gouges into the plaster. The house shook with each whisper. Finally, Thomas made a decision. If it wants a Harper, it can take me instead. He grabbed the box and carried it into the backyard. As he opened the box and shouted his name, the letters did nothing. Instead, they spelled one final truth across the grass in black ink. "The curse binds only daughters." Elaine screamed. Rebecca collapsed, coughing blood. The letters swarmed her, wrapping around her body like a cocoon. Thomas tore at them, but they burned his skin. Michael cried, "Don't let her go." The voices grew deafening, chanting the same phrase over and over. "The first daughter must bleed. The bloodline ends with her." And then the letters erupted in blinding light. When the light faded, Rebecca was gone. Only ashes remained where she had stood, in the box. A single new letter appeared, sealed with red wax. Thomas picked it up with trembling hands. On the front was written, "Survivor," but not for long. The family stared at each other, realizing the curse hadn't ended. It had only begun again. Rebecca Harper vanished on November 26, 1994. Her body was never recovered, and police reports listed her as a missing person. But for the Harper family, there was no mystery. They knew the truth, that the letters had claimed her. What remained was the unbearable question: why had the curse spared the others? And how long would that mercy last? December 1994 Christmas came and went in silence. The Harper house stood dark, curtains drawn, no decorations. Elaine could barely rise from bed. She clutched Rebecca's sketchbook to her chest, sobbing into the pages. Michael refused to sleep in his room, instead lying curled on the couch. He jumped at every creak, every whisper of wind against the windows. Thomas stopped going to work. He spent hours in the attic, staring at the empty box. The letters were gone, but he swore he could still hear them breathing in the dark. January 1995. In early 1995, neighbors noticed changes. Sarah Linton recalled the Harper's state. Sarah, 1997 interview. They weren't the same. Elaine looked like she'd aged 10 years and 2 months. Tom barely spoke. And the boy, Michael, he just stared. I brought over cookies once. He looked right through me, like he didn't even see me. One night I saw Tom burning papers in the backyard. But when I asked later, Elaine told me nothing was burned. Just ash that wouldn't stay dead. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Elaine found it again, the letter. It was on the kitchen table, sealed, with the same black handwriting. This time the word "survivor" was crossed out. Underneath in fresh ink, "Next." Elaine screamed and ripped it apart. But the next morning, it was whole again, lying neatly on her pillow. March 1995. In 2001, Thomas gave a brief interview to a local paper. It remains one of the only times he spoke publicly about the curse. "Do you know what it's like to bury a daughter without a body? To tell the police she vanished when you watched her turn to ash in front of you? They think I'm insane. But I know the truth. Those letters didn't end with Rebecca. I wake up every night to the sound of envelopes sliding under the door. But when I turn on the light, they're gone. I know my time's coming. The curse doesn't forgive. It waits." April 1995, Michael, only 12 at the time, began having violent night terrors. He told Elaine that Rebecca came to him in dreams, whispering from the other side. "She says it's not over," he muttered one morning, trembling. "She says they want me too." Elaine tried to reassure him, but inside she knew he was right. One night, she awoke to find him standing in front of the attic ladder, holding a blank envelope. His eyes were vacant, his lips moving. When she grabbed him, the envelope crumbled to dust in her hand. May 1995. The weight of grief fractured the family. Elaine and Thomas argued constantly. about moving away, about pretending to live normally, about whether the curse was real. By May, Elaine left with Michael to stay with her sister in another town. She said she couldn't live in that house another day. Thomas refused to leave. "It started here," he said, "and it will end here." June 1995. On June the 2nd, Elaine received a phone call at 3 a.m. The line was static at first. Then Thomas's voice faint. "It's here. It won't stop. Don't come back. Don't let Michael come back." The line went dead. Police later found the Harper house empty. No sign of Thomas. Only the wooden box remained in the attic, lid open, filled once more with letters. Every single one bore the name Thomas Harper. Elaine never returned to the house. She raised Michael quietly, changing towns often, living in constant fear. She never spoke of the curse publicly, though neighbors described her as paranoid, always checking doors, always burning mail. Michael grew into adulthood with the trauma carved into him. In interviews decades later, he described the weight of surviving when his sister had not. "They said we imagined it, but I know what I saw. I know what took Rebecca. Sometimes I wake up and find envelopes at my door. Blank ones. I burn them, but they come back. Why would anyone invent something like this? No one would, because it's still happening, and I don't know how much longer I can run." In 2020, Michael Harper disappeared under unexplained circumstances. His apartment was found empty. On his desk lay a single envelope sealed in black wax. The name on the front was not his. It was the name of his young daughter. The Harper bloodline never escaped Elijah Wren's curse. Each generation paid in turn, each marked by the letters no one could destroy, and even now the question remains, whose name will appear next? The end.